right, hello, drawing two. Today I am here to, as promised, introduce your next unit over the element of figure, the human figure. It's not even an element. It is the human figure, the focus of this current unit that we are starting today. You should either have already seen or you should see soon the assignments for getting started with this next unit. The slides I'm showing today are going to be kind of a review of some of the ideas we've talked about with figure previously. Hopefully, but in any case, just yeah, and it depends on if you've been in class with me before and so on and so forth. But it should be terms you're familiar with. And then I dig into some of the specifics of figure, which you might also already be familiar with, but I'm digging in even more. And yeah, this will also be your first two practice assignments are in these slides. Now I may only do this video up to practice one and then have to do a separate video. I don't know. We'll see how long this goes. But in any case, today I'm at least going to get through the review, the new ideas about figure and proportion, and talk about practice number one for this. So in any case, let me go ahead and start sharing the human figure next unit for us. Let me go ahead and hit play, get started. Whoa, didn't mean to do that already. Just wanted to see. Yeah, okay. Just make sure you guys can see it. So the human figure. Now, in discussing the human figure, there are going to be two main elements that really help you as far as the elements of art, and that is going to be value and mass. You should know very well by now that value is the shading and the highlights, creating a sense of lighting and shadow in your drawing, whether you're drawing with a white material on black paper, whether you're drawing with a dark material like pencil or charcoal on white paper, which is more typical. It is your creation of the light and shadow, both together. When you make a shadow, it implies light. When you make light, it implies a shadow. So in any case, yeah, that value is going to be pretty much the most important because when we talk about the human figure in this unit, it is going to be all about representing it faithfully, representationally. I'm asking you to treat this as like a figure drawing unit, which means you're not like stylizing these. You're not making characters. You're not making cartoons. You're not getting the idea of the figure. You are copying the figure as you see it, full value, trying to as naturalistically as possible, but if not fully naturalistic, at least representationally make it accurate. Okay, and that will also imply the sense of mass, which is the other element I want to reiterate. Mass or form, which just means the 3D-ness of a thing, and value is how you're going to create that. But at the end of the day, creating the proportions, creating the value, getting things right with the human figure, you have to create the sense of mass, the 3D-ness, because we are all massive. We have thickness, we have depth, height, and width. We have all three dimensions. So we have to create that sense of things, okay? And then siding is just basically proportion, okay? And obviously we all know proportion is probably after value, the next most important thing, in some ways more important. It's just a very important part of getting the figure correct. But before we get into that, let's review a few things. Now, if you don't know this about value, here's some terms and some really good things to make sure you know. I'm not saying that you need to remember every one of these words for like the quiz or anything. Just generally understand that, like I've already been saying, value is going to create a sense of mass, and value is light. It creates mass, which is a sense of 3D-ness. So looking here at this, you see to create a sense of depth on something like a sphere, we've created the light, and actually in this image, let's say we created it in pencil, you've created the shadows in all the different levels of shadows, all the different values, from the darkest dark to less dark darks, right, all the way transitioning up to highlights that are not fully bright white, and then leaving the widest parts of the thing, the brightest highlight if you're drawing on white paper, so that it gets this sense of light and light fading down to the darkest shadows. What I want you to for sure remember that I will tell you about these terms is that they are referring basically to all the different transitional values. Okay, that's going to be a term, if I haven't already used it already in this class, you need to be sure you know, which just means basically all the shadows in between the brightest bright and the darkest dark. You are going to make sure that you understand that, because understanding even the subtlest little differences when drawing figure is super, super important. So like I said, well, you may not need to know all of these, making sure you know cast, shadow, and then just basically the idea of transitional values. Yeah, that's important. And also a note up here, just because this is one of the most important things for me with figure. We have a tendency when we start drawing figure to just get the main like big shadows, and especially around the edges of things. But the reality is, when you're drawing a person, regardless of their skin tone, nobody is the same bright whiteness as paper. Nobody. Okay. So when you're drawing a figure, very little blank white highlight should be left. It really, and that's true of any representational drawing, because very few things are as bright as blank white paper. So that area of empty paper should only be reserved for the absolute brightest things. And on the figure, there are very few of those brightest things. You're talking about like tips of the nose, the forehead, anywhere that there's a shiny, like oily skin. And that's only going to be in small places where that light hits that directly. So very little blank white space should actually be left on the paper, which is me telling you, your drawing should be full of values. Now, some of those values might not be very much actual pencil, but you need them there or you will not get the sense of form and mass, that 3D-ness. Okay. So just remember that. I'm sure I'll say it over and over again. Just remember, we see forms. The other thing that you need to know to develop mass, and this is part of value, but something you really need to remember, is we see forms without lines around them, right? That's very important for the human figure. If I hold my hand up here and you guys can see it, or you hold your hand up in front of you, whatever, there is not a big dark line around whatever you're drawing, right? The values of, if I hold my hand up so that the white wall is behind it, my hand is darker than the wall, and that is why I see the difference. I don't see the difference because there's a line around it. So part of developing mass and using value, and especially on the figure, is to make sure you don't have too much outline, because a lot of outline makes things cartoony, makes things flat, and it's because it's not real, right? We don't see big lines around things. And we talked about before, if you were in one of my classes, you should know about, or in my drawing one class, you should know about planar analysis, which is basically just understanding that each kind of change in the direction of your body is going to be a change in plane, which is a change in value, which basically just is going on to say that like every time that value shifts, it's telling you that there's a directional change and depth there. So planar analysis, what you're seeing here and what you see on the next slide, helps you develop mass. Just understanding all the planes and angles that develop to create a rounded full figure. Now, you don't obviously have to do this. That's a one tool. If you need to practice developing some mass, you can kind of learn to block things in planar analysis. This is not super important for figure, but it's reiterating just, and hopefully if you did do this assignment with me in the past, it might help you, or if you've done it with anybody else, remember that, planes correspond to changes in direction and changes in the way that the light hits it, because when things change, the light's hitting at a different angle, so the value is going to be different. Okay, so you develop mass, you develop value to create that sense of 3D, and you do it without outline, no outline. Now, what's this link here? If you have access to the slides, you should go click that link. It's a KQ Ed video over mass. I'm not requiring it in this online course because you're already watching so many videos of me, but in my drawing class, I often show these KQ Ed videos over each element of art to my students. If you haven't seen that before, you can click on this one. This one will take you directly to the mass video, but then if you look, it's part of a playlist of 7 videos, one for each of the 7 elements, so you can go watch the value one. You can re-up on any of your 7 elements, line, shape, value, form, color, texture, and space. Anyway, okay. So beyond value and mass, I also want to talk again about sighting and proportion. This is basically just reviewing the fact that, remember, you can use tools like sticks, sighting sticks, pencils, whatever, to make measurements of typically when we cite, we find things like a head or a foot or a hand. A lot of times it's cliche to use a head as the measurement, but you don't have to do that. If the head is not prominent enough or it's foreshortened, it's way back there, and the foot is more apt, you can use the foot. But whatever you do, you select a measurement and you compare things, so in this case, we did use the head, and then we said that the body is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 heads tall. Note that because he's sitting, it's not a full 7 or 8 heads tall. Right, that's an important thing to note, because when people change their position, change their seat, I guarantee you he's not 2.5 heads wide too, because his knee is sticking out into space. He's turned sideways. His chest is actually very thin, maybe only 1 head wide, because you're looking at the side of it. It is foreshortened. These are all ideas we talked about with gesture. Again, if you've done that assignment with me or anybody else, you should have talked about sighting and comparison. Yeah, this also helps you check angles. You can check things vertically. That's another thing. Besides just the measuring, which is what I call sighting. And again, I talk about, I don't know if you've done it. You could probably look up videos on how to do it, but just to make sure, what you can do is take something like a pencil or you can use your thumb if you don't have a pencil. That's the right one. Right kind of measurements for you. But what you can do is, so for sighting, typically I say hold your arm out as far as you can towards the picture or model that you're using, and then like for me, I'll use my thumb and say like, okay, his head is about half of my thumb's width, so I guess that means that his height should be 3 of my thumb. Okay, yeah. Oh, so he's 6 heads tall, right? All that, and then you go to your paper when you draw the head. Now you can say, or you use the measurement of something that will correspond to the width of your thumb. You go half of that for the head, then you go 6 heads tall. That is a really poor explanation. I feel like I'm not being very direct with it. But basically, hopefully you get the idea that once you draw the head, then you measure 6 of those on your paper. It's not about, obviously you don't want every single drawing to be the same width as your thumb or whatever. But yeah, basically use that and extrapolate from there. Maybe if I find a good video, I'll share it. But in any case, this helps you get angles, helps you block in things. Remember though, you don't want to super focus and finish the head and then do the rest of the body. That's going to cause you problems. You want to bounce all over, but you can check proportions in this way. But then also note things like his head is level vertically with his foot. It's in line vertically with his foot. His elbow is behind his right foot. His left foot is much further out. It's in front of his knee. Things like that should also help you get the sighting and proportion right. Okay, that's long enough on proportion. The other thing that we talked about with gesture that I want to reiterate is making sure you pay attention to positive and negative space. Pay attention to what is there, but also what's not there. Spaces between legs, spaces between the arm and the body if they've got their arm up, space between the head and the neck if they're reaching up, whatever. Triangles, rectangles, reduce it down to shapes. And it makes it much easier for you to do this. Look for implied forms. And then also, I'm reiterating here, almost all skin tones have value. So make sure that you don't leave basically any bright plain white spots on a drawing. Now, these are gestural. Yours are going to be much more detailed, but just keep all that in mind. In fact, and one of the things as far as negative space, when I talk about drawing hands, I always say, if you have trouble drawing hands, forget the hand, draw the spaces between the fingers, then go from there. I don't know. That's one of those things. Just make sure you pay attention to positive and negative space. Okay. That was the review of things we've already talked about. So from here, I want to get into your first 2 practices are going to be about focusing on the human face and the human head. So I want to talk about some proportions for portraits or busts or just specific facial features. So let's start by doing a quick run through. Many of you probably have had this. It's in books. They teach a lot in high school and middle school drawings, these perfect proportions of the human face. Here we use Elizabeth Hurley to get these proportions because a lot of people say that she's got a near perfectly symmetrical face, which makes it easy to model after. Although this is all useful in mapping and understanding facial proportions from an academic perspective, just remember every person's face will vary. The guidelines that I'm about to give you about relationships of eyes and nose and placement, every person's a little bit different. So if you want to capture a specific person, And when you're looking at a specific person, you look at them and you capture the nuances, right? You have to understand that they're going to vary a little bit, and use this understanding to build your foundational planning. Make sure you understand if there's like a moment that you're like, wow, I'm not really sure how this is proportioned. You can sometimes recall the information I'm about to give you to help you out. But overall, you just need to remember you have to look at the thing you're looking at. Actually, in fact, at the end of this, I'm going to tell you to forget all of it, because as soon as a person turns their head, everything goes out the window. But in any case, just make sure you have to cite your model. But we have to know these as a baseline. So just to review that, if you haven't ever heard these things, first of all, your eye line is in the middle point of your skull. I won't necessarily say the middle point of your face, but a lot of people, because your eyes are actually higher on your face than the middle, a lot of people draw the eyes too high. But the reality is, it is in the middle of your skull. You just don't realize that your face goes up under your hair and that your skull keeps going. But your eyes are perfectly in the middle of where your skull actually is. So if you go, before you draw hair, you have to understand that if you draw the full kind of oval cranium shape that's slightly lower or narrower at the bottom, the eyes are going to be smack in the middle of it. Pretty much almost universally, when I look at my students and they start drawing this, I tell them, move the eyes down. Move the eyes down. It's almost, if you don't see that your eyes are perfectly in the middle of the skull, move them down. You can adjust as needed, but I promise if you put them above the center line, it's going to look wrong by the end. Once you add the hair and all the features, they're going to be too high, and there's just not enough information in there. So, or at that point, your lower part of your face will be so big that you won't be able to fill it with the information you get from the mouth and nose and all that kind of stuff. In any case, the eyes are in the middle. The top half goes up to your forehead, and then beyond that into your skull, top of skull, and then the bottom of the chin is from the eyes to the bottom of the chin is the bottom half. Okay, the actual face, not your full skull, but the actual section that we see without hair, is divided into thirds. The top third being your forehead, the middle third being your eyes and nose, the bottom third being from the bottom of your nose to your chin, basically your mouth. So that's a good guideline as well. Also worth noting, which I'll mention later, is the middle third corresponds to your ears as well. Now, as far as the width of your head, typically they say the space, and this is actually pretty much accurate, the width of your eye is the same as the space between your eyes. Okay, that's pretty universal. And then the sides outside of your eye are almost a full eye wide as well. So one on the left, one on the right. But that said, it's not quite a full eye's width unless someone has a really wide face. Typically, it's a little bit less than an eye's width outside of your eyes. Also, this is one of the most important things. Look at the little graphic of me and understand that if I take my head and just turn it even a little bit, well, if I turn it a little bit, that space between my eyes gets a little smaller. The eye that's further from you will get a little smaller. And then if I turn it far enough, the space between the outside of my eye and the side of my skull, it disappears. It's gone. And the side that's facing you will actually get much, much bigger. I hope that made sense. Yeah. So the side going away from you of my cheek and my temple, you will stop seeing that. So it's not a full eye's width. We'll reiterate that later, but just remember, these are limited. This is one of the main ones that I always think of as kind of limited in its value. Now, the placement of the nose and the lips, a good guideline is that the inside of the eyes lines up with the outside of your nose. Again, not universal. Some people have narrow noses, some people have wider noses. The pupil of your eye should correspond about to the edge of your lips. Now, sometimes that may not look correct because some people have more plump lips or more narrow lips, but it's usually pretty correct. Now, it's not 100%, but usually pretty correct. In this case, again, looking at the little image of me, just remember that if you turn your head a little diagonal, tilt it a little bit, boom, those proportions, they're there, but you're going to have to make those lines diagonal, right? And again, if I turn, that might change, right? Things, well, and actually they shouldn't really change even if you turn, but you're going to have to adjust for that turn in there. Now, in any case, brow line is, oh yeah, the top of the ears. Your eyebrows are, they close out that top third of your forehead. And then the top of your eyebrows should, or your eyebrow line should match the top of your ears. Your nose, the bottom of your nose typically matches the bottom of your ears. Again, if I tilt my head back, that changes. If I tilt my head to the side, maybe you have to adjust. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so yeah, if I hadn't said it enough, Oh, also, just a side note here, I want to talk about with hair. A lot of people draw the full face, draw the skull, and then they just pop hair right on top of the thing that they've drawn. Don't do that. Your hair grows out of your head and it comes down onto your skull. So pay attention. It is a part of like your skull. A large part of your skull will actually have hair on it, not just sticking out of it. So never do that. Most people by the time they're in college have figured that part of drawing hair out, but just keep it in mind. Her skull goes behind her head, and yeah, her hair goes down onto the skull. It doesn't just pop out the top. It's also in front, it's in back, it's in front of the shoulders, it's behind the shoulders if it's long, all that kind of stuff. So keep those things in mind. But yeah, as I've said, like repeatedly now, but just to reiterate one more time, now basically forget all of the things I just told you. Not really. Just push it to the back of your mind, but just understand that it's very limited in its use. It's very important to have it in your mind, but you also need to forget it because of those tilts upward, backwards, side to side, angled, whatever. Those guidelines are good, but every person's face is different, which I've already said too. But even more so, what I keep repeating is that when you angle your face, the features will vary. They'll be foreshortened, they will change. In fact, if I lean way, way back, all of those facial features are in this tiny little section of my face, right? So just remember all that. Side note, if you keep looking at the drawing of me and you see these like weird marks on my arm, that's just clay because I've been in the studio all day. Just fun side note. If you've been like, what's that? Mystery solved. In any case, practice number one. I am going to split this into two. So this video is just going to end with going over practice number one, I think. Well, I say that now. It's only been 20 minutes. In any case, practice number one, facial features. Facial features, in this case, we're going to break down for your first practice for this week. You're going to draw things like eyes, noses, mouths, ears. You're going to draw the individual features, and you're going to focus on that. And then next week we're going to put them together into busts. And then practice three, which you don't have access to yet, is going to be hands and feet. And then four will be the full figure, all brought together. Okay, in any case, practice number one, instructions. What you're going to do in your sketchbook. Side note here, if you've been using your sketchbook for any kind of motif or sketchbook project that I've already asked you to do, just kind of make sure you did know. I mean, you're going to upload the pictures anyway, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, you can use your same sketchbook. Okay, doesn't matter. Now I'm realizing because this is online, it's all photos. But in any case, don't forget to be doing the motif project. So in your sketchbook, using blocking and then full mass, meaning you will block out the full shapes, block out the big ideas, and then create. You'll basically draw a gesture. When I say block in, you're drawing gestures, you're getting proportions, things set. You're doing it very, very lightly, and then you are going to fill them in with value. That's also why I kind of showed you the planar analysis in a way. Gestures are kind of planar analysis. See, however you want to do it, though. That's kind of just a suggestion I make, is to block in, and then you fill it in with full value. Okay, anyway, you're going to draw four of each of the facial features. The ears, lips, nose, and eyes. So 4 ears, 4 lips, 4 noses, 4 eyes. Now that can be 2 sets of eyes. I typically suggest maybe like 1 set of eyes and then 2 separate ones. I want all of them to be kind of different angles. I want you to try different things, okay? And I want you to draw from a model. Do not, under any circumstances, draw from your head, okay? Don't draw from your head. And I'd prefer you don't even draw from, actually don't, for this assignment, do not draw from a drawing. If you're practicing and you want to draw from a drawing, maybe that's kind of okay. But when you commit to this assignment, you are using a model or someone sitting right in front of you, or you're using a photo of a real person. Do not draw a drawing, and certainly never draw from your head. That's how you make cartoons, which are fine, and you're great. It's great if you do that on your own, and that's your own way of making art, but that's not what we're looking for here. No more than 4 forms per page. Basically, I don't want you to draw everything on one page. If you want to draw all 4 eyes on one full sketchbook page, that's fine. All 4 noses, whatever. That said, that's if you're using a 9x12 full-size sketchbook. If you are using a 5.5x8, one of those small half sketchbooks, which I use a lot because I think they're easier to carry around, I don't want you to do any more than 2. So 2 eyes, 2 noses, 2 mouths, or whatever, mix and match. But it's only 2 per page if you're using half sketchbook. If you're using a full sketchbook, 4. Use blocking, use siding, show mass, show value. No drawing from a drawing or your own head. I'm saying these things repeatedly. So you shouldn't do them. Avoid outline. That's the most important one. Remember, we don't see things with big dark lines around them. That's because we see, if you look at the little picture of me again, you see the dark value of my finger, you see the light value of the background. Now, this background's not plain white. You got to put a little value there, but there's a lot more value in my finger. That difference is why you see them, not because a line divides them. Okay? Avoid outline, fill the paper with proper value. Only blank paper should be in the brightest spots. Only blank paper should be in the brightest spots. You know, again, the shiny spots of your face, shiny spots of your hand, whatever. You will turn into canvas by midnight in 1 week. 1 week, exact due date on canvas. I've already posted this, hopefully by the time you're seeing this. So, yeah. In any case, so yeah, that's all going to be required. Draw from models, don't draw from drawing. Oh, I did want to note in the assignment, yes, I have already posted this. In the assignment, you will see that there is a video of someone kind of going through like a little demo of how to do it step by step. I put that in there instead of me having to do a demo because that way I don't have to find a document camera and take even more of your time. You have another video. She doesn't do ears in the video, but it's also just good to see someone else draw. But no, I don't think she's drawing from her head. I think she's drawing while looking at something, but it's very canned. It's very like step by step. And so it's a little generalized. And you need to remember that you're going to be copying a drawing if you copy her way of doing it. Okay, you're going to be drawing a drawing because you're not going to see her model. You just see her drawing. So you can't turn that in if you use that for practice, but you can use it to get some ideas in practice. So check that out. That's a separate video. Now, to close out this and make sure I give you some tips for how to draw some of these specific facial features, I have a few very specific tips. I'm doing this in lieu of the demo and then along with that video, that separate video. For all features, this is for all of them, my general tips. I think this is going to be a little repetitive. My main tip is not to outline. Already said that. Don't generalize, flatten, or cartoonize. We don't have lines around our hands. Remember, features are 3D and protrude from or into our skull. That's actually one I haven't said so far, but you need to remember our noses stick out from our face. Our eyes sink into our head. Our mouths come out of our face and are rounded as they go into our cheeks. Our ears are on the side of our heads. Okay, that's not all going to be super important as you draw in specific features, but you need to remember these things have mass, have depth. Keep that in mind as you draw them. And I said you because, yeah, it's like eyeballs and brains and stuff. Our skull, you got to remember all that. In fact, yeah, this is one I've already said. Don't leave a bunch of blank white space. Just about all of any given feature will have some level of value. When you're drawing a nose, it might have a little white on the tip, but that's it. The other parts might be very light value, but there's some value there. Pretty much the entire mouth has some sort of value. Maybe the shiniest part of the lips, or if you see teeth. Also, I will even say teeth aren't solid white. No matter who you're talking about, there's value on them. So when you draw these features, keep that in mind. Even the eyeballs, which are shiny white, like wet balls in your face, they have very limited shiny spots. Okay. I'm gonna just have a laugh at that thing that I said a second ago, but college. Anyway, so yeah, even the eyes are not just bright white. Okay, anyway, moving on to specific tips for the eyes. Do not try to start with an almond shape and go from there. That's one of the things that drives me the most crazy is that you draw an almond shape and you just start. If you start with that, you're going to start generalizing. Even in the video that I've connected, she draws a full circle and then finds a part of it that's going to be the eye that she draws. Also, it's important that you don't start with the almond shape because it's that going back to that thing of if I turn my head and you only get a little bit of my eye, you might not see a full almond shape. If I'm leaning far back and I'm squinting, you're not going to see very much of my eye at all, okay? So you need to get away from drawing the almond shape and then filling it in from there. Think of it as an orb. I'll use orb instead of ball. An orb in your face that's behind your skull, behind your eyelids, and you need to represent that full roundness. I start with the eyelids, or many times I actually start with the white of the eyes. I will find the two triangles or two shapes. I often say, and I'll say it for sure in the demo of talking about putting the full face together, When did you learn to draw triangles? You learned to draw triangles when you were in elementary school. So if you can draw triangles, you can draw eyes. If you can draw triangles, you can draw noses. Okay, anyway, I'll get more into that. Sometimes the white is just two triangles, usually of different sizes, depending on how the head is turned. Sometimes they're different sizes. Yeah, if the head is turned, if turned fully, then you should only see one side. Oh yeah, if you're doing a full profile eye, you're only going to see one side of the white of the eye. So you better not draw the other side. Okay, and actually the edge of it is going to be your iris and pupil. Okay, keep those things in mind. The iris and pupil rarely are fully visible. That's a big one. You can look at the little video of me right now and pretty much any picture of any person, unless they have their eyes super wide, you don't see the whole thing. It's partially covered, top and bottom, typically, by the eyelids. Very rarely are they fully visible, the iris and pupil. Okay, if you don't know what the iris and pupil are, you can go look up the anatomy of the eye. I could teach you all about that, but that takes too much time. Remember that eyes are mostly covered spheres going back behind the lids. Just remember that big fullness. Okay, not quite done. Tips for features continued. Specifics for noses. Big one here. Do not start with two lines on either side of the nose. I don't want Squidward or kazoo noses. That's my big kind of laugh there. No Squidward noses. The upper part of the nose is basically a rectangle with two triangles. This goes back to when did you learn to draw rectangles and triangles? Elementary school. If you can draw those, you can draw the front of a nose and the two sides. Okay. Usually one of the two triangles is light, and the other one is shadow, depending on where the light is coming from. If you look at the little image of me, you'll see there is literally one white triangle on one side, then that flat rectangle that's my skin tone, then a shadow on the other. Boom. Easy. Good demo. Yeah, the tip of the nose is a sphere, which then cuts back to form the nostrils. My nostrils are going back in space. Keep that in mind, especially if you draw a profile. You got to remember all this stuff. And if you you turn your head, those triangles and everything change as well. Moving on to the mouth. Don't start with two slugs or a big football. Okay, that's my big one there. Don't just start drawing these like big lipstick lips, right? That's not really how it works. I want you to start with the middle line. Okay, start with the center line and focus on building out from there. So I say draw the middle line and really draw from there the upper lip. Okay, many times, and then once you draw the upper lip, you get all the shadow in there. It's almost always going to be shadow because it cuts back into your mouth. It might have a shiny spot or whatever, but mostly shadow. But then after you finish the upper lip, jump to the shadow under your bottom lip. Because here's the thing is a lot of times you don't even have to draw the bottom lip because it's so highlighted, right? A lot of times the bottom lip will be highlighted. Once you do the upper lip and the shadow under the bottom lip, boom, the bottom lip's just there, okay? Because it's brightly lit because it's facing up towards typically the light source, okay? Now it's not plain bright white. Okay, you might have to put some value there, but for the most part, that bottom lip, you don't have to draw a bunch of lines around it. It's a gap in the shadows, because it's facing up, right? All that kind of stuff. So focus on the upper lip, then draw the shadow under the bottom lip. Basically, your chin, or in my case, the soul patch kind of thing. Draw that, and then boom, you're kind of close to done from there. You'll have to put a little shadows on the bottom, but mostly implied. You don't have to draw a line around it. Okay. If there are teeth, do not try to draw every tooth. Just draw the overall shape of the teeth and then focus on the shadows that create gaps, right? To denote the gaps using shadows. Also remember, teeth are rounded. This is going back to even people with the brightest white teeth. There will be variations in value because of the shine and the roundness. There will be parts of it that go away from the shadow. So you're going to have to add a little bit of shading in there. Don't think you're being unflattering to the person. It's just how teeth work. There should be some value change. I forgot to say that about the eyes, but it's super important to remember because eyes are rounded. I did say that. They're not going to catch light fully either. They're going to have shadows, right? It's just not going to be plain white paper. For ears, I don't have a lot to say about ears. They're basically shadows and folds. If you just draw what you see, you'll be all right. Nobody really looks and is like, oh, I'm not sure that's Ben Stiller's ear. Did you use, if you're using a picture of Ben Stiller? I don't know. Nobody says that about ears. So that's kind of the easiest one because you can sort of generalize as long as you get the gap going in and get all the folds and wrinkles, and there's pretty much no bright white spots on an ear. It's full of shadows. As long as you don't leave too much bright white light, you're going to be okay when it comes to ears. Okay, I think that's enough of my tips. Practice two is going to be full heads and busts, which you're going to get into next week. So I'm going to stop right there before I go any further. Um, Stop sharing. And then I will go ahead and post this. Yeah, 34 minutes. That's a good demo for practice one. And then next week it'll be a shorter demo, just or shorter discussion talking about full heads. You'll put it all together. But for now, I just want you to focus on individual facial features. And I will talk to you more later. Send me a message if you have any questions. I appreciate you. Thanks.